GPT-4o and the Vision model, Gemini 1.5 Flash, No Fluff Just Stuff has event in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm doing a JetBrains live stream this week and the usual collection of tweets and toots. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ken Cousin. This is Tales from the Jar Side. On the Tales from the Jar Side YouTube channel, as well as a newsletter, we try to tell you what's going on in the IT industry, but we try to tell you what's worth your time and also what isn't worth your time. The emphasis here is on understanding rather than just the basics of how to use things. This week's newsletter is dated the week of May 12th through 19th, 2024. And as I mentioned, this week I gave several talks at the No Fluff Just Stuff event in Madison, Wisconsin. The subtitle this week is, I love dried fruit so much, you might say it's my raison d'etre. Rim shot. That's just awful, isn't it? But okay, what are you going to do? I found that on Mastodon. The regular disclaimer, regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or viewer or listener. If you wish to become a jarhead, you can subscribe using the button on the newsletter, or you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, whichever you prefer. Let's take a look at our first section. The first section is talking about OpenAI and its release of the new GPT-4o. As I say, this week in AI featured big announcements. Everybody knew Google I/O started on Tuesday, so naturally OpenAI wanted to steal their thunder, and they made their announcements Monday before that. On Monday, they released GPT-4o, where the O supposedly stands for Omni. The idea is that the model can handle text and images and audio all together, and the demo video they showed was very impressive. That's all well and good, but this field is filled with hype and promises that the resulting products can't match. Sorry about that in the newsletter. So for me, the real question was, what's available right now? They can promise all they want for the future, but I'm not trusting anything that I can't actually try out. Fortunately, when I went to the ChatGPT website, which, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed, now redirects to chatgpt.com, in case you didn't notice, GPT-4 was available immediately. You can see in the image I have here in the newsletter that when I looked at GPT-4o and hit the drop-down, that was available N4, N3.5, and there's even this thing called temporary chat, which I'd never used before. As I say, I'm not sure what that's even for, although I assume from the name that it just doesn't store the chat at all. A few tests confirmed that GPT-4o was substantially faster than GPT-4. The quality looked pretty good, and the answers were fine so far. So the other question that I wanted answered was whether or not the model was available programmatically. That's what I'm really interested in. I'm working on a book right now called about accessing AI tools from Java. The working title is Adding AI to Java, coming soon from the Pragmatic Bookshelf. So I wanted to update all my examples. And I ran my existing test that lists the models, just checking for the various models. And hey, there it was, GPT-4o, listed right in there. Not sure why they went with lowercase, although I guess in the long model names, all the letters are lowercase, so I suppose that's consistent. At any rate, when you look at the pricing page, when you access the app programmatically, or access the AI programmatically, the prices here are actually half of the prices for GPT-4, which was their flagship model. As you can see, is listed as about half a cent, it's exactly half a cent for 1,000 input tokens and 1.5 cents for 1,000 output tokens. And with GPT-4 itself, it was 1 penny and 3 cents, so exactly double that. Hey, that's good, especially if it's faster and it's better. But wait, there's more. GPT-4o comes with a vision model. Now, I talked about vision models last week in the newsletter. The idea behind a vision model is you can upload an image and then ask it questions about the image, and it will be able to interrogate that. So that is a very useful feature, and this week I decided I wanted to use it. Now, I just have to mention, before I dig into the code here, I actually had to use this recently. I was trying to fix a DNS configuration issue on my machine, and that always terrifies me. I'm always worried about doing that. But that is exactly the sort of thing that AI tools do well, because it's not like it isn't a solved problem. Lots of people have done that. I'm just not one of them, or I don't do it very often, so I'm not sure. But this isn't something innovative. It's lots of people have done it. So therefore, its training data ought to have all the necessary steps to be able to do that. What I did is I had it walk me through the process. And at each stage, I took a screenshot of the section of the documentation that lists what the errors were, what my current settings were, anything like that. And in ChatGPT, I'd hit the paperclip and I'd upload the image and ask it a question about it. And it could read that image, no problem. It actually walked me through everything. Yeah, those settings look right, or no, now you need to add this, or what have you. It's really convenient, worked out really well. So I wanted to do it programmatically. And up until the release of GPT-4o, there was no explicit vision model listed in the programmatic API. But now there is. If you go to the documentation page, there's a section called Vision. Now, this still isn't in the API, but it is on the documentation page. And the Vision part says, if you can read this, let's see if I can make that a little bigger. Learn how to use vision capabilities to understand images. Both GPT-4 Turbo have vision capabilities, meaning the models can take in images and answer questions about them. Historically, language model systems have been limited by taking in a single input modality, text, and then they talk about it and they go into some detail. The little sample they showed allowed you to do a curl request, and that endpoint is the regular chat endpoint. So they're not adding a new endpoint for this. It's specifically taking in different data. So the content type header is the same. The authorization header is the same. There's the model. And the messages, when you access the chat, then the messages always have a role of user or assistant or what have you. And content was a simple string before. But now you can see content is this big block here, which has a JSON object with type of text, and text is what's in the image. And then here's another one that's type as image URL, and then a URL to the image. Or as it turns out, you could replace that URL with the base 64 encoded image itself. So just put in a giant string there. So if your image is already exposed to the outside world, you could put in a URL, but if not, might as well encode it. So that's new. Now, I wanted to test this out. So what I did is I started in a little sample test, and I'm in a Spring Boot app. So I created the REST client myself. I used the builder, set the base URL, the headers, all that ones I needed. And the payload, I just used a multi-line string in Java. You see the 3 double quotes at the beginning and a carriage return. And this is exactly what they had in their little sample. Here, you're even specifying the MIME type of the data being sent in, the image, and it's base 64. And this %s here is going to be the base 64 encoded image as a string. Going to plug that into the payload and just go ahead and retrieve it. And that allowed me to plug the image into the text. The image I'm using is the same one I showed in last week's newsletter. I generated this with DALL-E 3, or actually this one might be Stable Diffusion, but one or the other. I generated an image of cats playing cards, and there it is. So when I uploaded that, I did in fact get back a message that had a description in it. The image depicts a group of cats gathered around a table playing cards. There are 5 cats, etc. And it all looks right. It did a really good job. Now, that's fine. But while it's easy enough to send in a text block for the input, when you get the output, you want to parse it because you want to actually extract the content out of that rather than just dealing with the whole thing as one giant string. But here's the key. I don't want to have one set of code for chat and a different set of code for images when they're both going to the same endpoint and I'm just sending in a request and getting back a response. So this allowed me to play around with, in Java, these sealed interfaces and records. So up at the top here, I have 2 different types of messages. So this sealed interface defines simple message and complex message as the type of unified messages. And a simple message has just the string content. But a complex message has a whole list of content. And what's content? Well, now content is another interface. It's either regular text or it's an image URL that has the string in it. So this stuff got a little involved, and I'm going to make a video about that and everything. But ultimately, what I wind up with is a chat request that has a model, a list of unified messages, and a temperature to max tokens coming out, going in. And there's some other optional parameters I could add in there that I didn't. Now, the output hasn't changed. The output is the same output I had before, so I didn't show that here. But when I put in all those records and sent everything that way, yes, everything worked again. So again, that's going to be part of the next video on this stuff. So I want to get into all that, and I will be making that video, but I had some issues last week with some recordings. In fact, that's why I'm doing this recording using Descript. It's one of the tools I've mentioned. When I tried to do a recording with ScreenFlow, my normal tool, I got awful sound. Listen to this. That's horrible. That's just terrible. But that's part of what I sent them. So I used the same mic and audio setup while I'm using them right now on Descript, and it's working just fine. I tried it with Tella. That worked just fine as well. But that's as far as I got. Now, another quick couple notes on the OpenAI announcements. First of all, custom GPTs are now available to everyone, not just the GPT's premium users, the plus subscribers or whatever. So I put in a link here to my Makito mentor that is basically answering questions about Makito based on my Makito Made Clear book that I published through Pragmatic Programmers. Also, I made a Pragmatic Assistant custom GPT for Pragmatic authors that just had their user manual and the custom guide and everything, their own internal PDFs. Finally, I also saw that GPT-4o is going to be made available to everybody for free. Now, my experience with it the last couple of days is it's being a little sluggish and we're having some issues with it. I suspect it's because a lot more people are trying it out than they anticipated, and they're struggling with scaling up on that. But we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I do expect that to have a big impact, though, because a lot of people are accustomed to using cheap because they didn't want to pay for it, and they have no idea what a leap it is to go to GPT-4 now to 4o. It's going to make a huge difference in the community. So we'll take a look at all that, and then it'll be time to go to Gemini 1.5 Flash. After that came Google I/O, and Google had tons of announcements. They did their normal thing where they had lots of conflicting names or difficult to follow names that confused everybody, but everybody was so excited and so eager and so happy to make all these announcements. There was only one thing that I focused on, is that we now have a new model. First of all, Gemini 1.5 Pro seems to be available to everybody now, or at least everybody who's willing to use the paying model on the subscription. And that's the one with the million token window, context window, and that's great. I did find this recap of Google I/O that had the developer keynote in 5 minutes and extracted all the announcements out of it. The one I focused on is that now there's a new Gemini 1.5 model called Flash. And this is basically, I think it's the competitor to Anthropic's Claude 3 Haiku. It's the fast, low-cost alternative to the higher precision, more powerful models. It also, interestingly enough, has 1 million tokens in the context window. So for me, I thought, all right, let me give it a try. And a couple of weeks ago, I tried out 1.5 Pro with the giant context window by putting my entire book, Help Your Boss Help You, into the context window. I figured, let me try the same thing. And again, 1.5 Flash was in the list of models that were available. So I thought, let me go ahead and grab that and put in my book again and ask it to summarize the book. And here's the summary that came back. And it was actually pretty quick. And this summary is actually pretty good too. I'm very happy with it. And I'm only uploading about 80,000 tokens, but okay, it's 80,000 tokens. And right now that was fine. So at any rate, the only downside to this thing is I was desperately trying to come up with a decent Grandmaster Flash pun or joke that I could put in with Gemini 1.5 Flash, and I couldn't come up with anything. So if you come up with any jokes, if you could think of anything, please feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'll cite you next week if you want, or I'll just use it without incriminating evidence if you prefer. Let's move on to the next section. This week, there was a No Fluff Just Stuff event in Madison, Wisconsin, held on Friday and Saturday. My trip came on Thursday, and then I was supposed to present all day on Friday and then leave Saturday morning. And Madison is not the easiest place in the world to get to, at least not from where I am. You do have to fly to Chicago and then take a little puddle jumper from Chicago to Madison and back. And I did have some travel difficulties. I know nobody's really interested in travel stories, but I did have to run through an airport and try to get to make the plane to Madison, and everything got complicated from there, but I did get there. And then I was scheduled to give 5 talks. So I talked about modern Java 21 and above. So that was fun. I had a section called Calling AI Tools from Java. So that listed a lot of these different tools. And then I had a nice session on LangChain for J, and all my demos worked. So that was fun. And then finally, I had a 2-part session, which was partly a workshop on practical AI tools for Java developers, where we did a lot of the coding and we used Ollama and we used some of the others as well. About halfway through the day, Jay Zimmerman, who runs the show, said that my friend Venkat Subramaniam, the inimitable Venkat, was in Europe at the time. He was supposed to come in on Friday and talk all day Saturday, and he got stuck in Frankfurt Airport. And from what I hear, there's a story there, but he wasn't going to be able to make it. And he asked me if I could do 2 talks in the morning on Saturday. Now that entailed making last-minute changes to my flights, but they were apparently able to do that. And then for the talks in the afternoon, I think you got Danny Hossa to cover Venkat's talks for that. And that means I did a 2-part discussion of upgrading to modern Java, where I talk about a lot of the more interesting in-depth features associated with streams, lambdas, method references, and the like. That went really well until I got to the airport, and then they had mechanical problems, and here was flight issues again. But once again, I made it home. So it all worked out. It certainly worked out better for me than it did for Venkat. And of course, as I say here in the newsletter, this means now Venkat owes me a favor, and don't think I won't collect, because yeah, I probably won't. But nevertheless, I'll make him pay somehow. When I mentioned this online as part of the newsletter release, he actually responded the offer to pay me in dad jokes. And that seems like a fair trade, actually. I'll have to see what he comes up with, but they better be either very good or very bad or both. And there we go. So now let's move on to our tweets and toots. Looking at the tweets and toots this weekend, this probably should have been its own subsection, but I just want to mention it. And there was a tweet involved. I'm doing a live stream for JetBrains, or I'm participating in their regular live stream. I think they do one monthly, maybe more frequently than that. And this is going to be Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So that's Eastern Daylight Time. They say on their tweet, it's May 23rd, 3 to 4 p.m. UTC. So adjust that to wherever you happen to be around the world. It is free, so you're welcome to come. The basic title here is Running Uncensored and Open Source LLMs Locally. Let me give you the little explanation. The registration here is available if you're interested. You can check it out in the newsletter. If I click on that, you'll see that it's going to go to a site at info.jetbrains.com, and you could register whenever you like. But my discussion says general AI models like ChatGPT, Claude AI, or Gemini have a broader scope, and their answers to questions can be correspondingly imaginative. But many vendors don't want to be held responsible for awkward answers, so they add guardrails to limit the responses. Those limitations often restrict the models so much as to make them unable to answer what we would consider reasonable questions. So in this talk, we'll discuss the Ollama system, which does 2 things for you. First of all, it allows you to download and run open source models on your local hardware. And better than that, because everything is running locally, no private or proprietary information is shared over the internet. Ollama also, and this is the other nice benefit, exposes the models through a tiny local web server so you can access the service programmatically. We'll look at how to do all that and how to use newest Java features like sealed interfaces, records, and pattern matching. The stuff I talked about earlier in the newsletter, I'm going to do that on the Ollama model, which is particularly simple, and hopefully that'll be very helpful. If you happen to be around, if you're a jarhead, be sure to say hi, and I'll see some of you anyway, hopefully on Thursday. Okay, moving to the next tweet. I titled this, Aren't We All? It's a quote from Vin Scully, the famous announcer who went on for decades. He said, he's listed as day-to-day, but then again, aren't we all? And yes, aren't we all indeed? Don Van Atta Jr. retweeted that. I thought that was great. This one says, the Scots were right. There was a comment that said, based on genital structure, men should really be the ones wearing skirts and women should be wearing pants. And somebody replied, the Scots were right all along. And then another person said, the Scots did it to hide more knives on their bodies. And then, of course, the reply was, the Scots were right all along. Rimshot. Personally, I think combining knives with men's skirts could lead to problems, but not to mention getting a little cold down there, but who am I to argue? This one was titled Orwellian. It looks like a an AI generated image of George Orwell, as he got his name tag on there, reading the book 2024 and just reacting in horror. And yeah, I get that. So that's actually a pretty good usage of AI. So at any rate, this one I called Born and Bred. Rim shot. Says, I went to the zoo the other day, and in one cage, all they had sitting in the middle was a sliced multi-grain loaf. Turns out it was bred in captivity. Oh, what a terrible gag. I thought my jokes were bad, and they are, but wow, that's horrible. And now you have it too. Here's one way to solve this problem. There's a guy there saying, it's not the virus, it's 5G, bro. And the dog's sitting there sleeping next to him. No, man, Bill Gates made it. Dog wakes up, says, no way, bro. I do my own research on YouTube, and the dog's paying attention. And you can see at night while the guy's asleep, the dog's going to smother him with a pillow. And that certainly is one way to solve the problem. This one I called Q Ray Parker Jr. It says, there's electric sheep in your neighborhood. Who you going to call? Blade Runner. Yes. There's a replicant sleeping in your bed. Who you going to call? Blade Runner. I ain't afraid of robots. Now, again, I read it the way it goes because that scans, but I can't help autocorrecting it myself too. I ain't afraid of no robots, but yeah, I know that doesn't fit. Anyway, this one said, once an English teacher, and it was a cemetery slab here. It says, here lies, not lays, Billy Woody Robbins Reed, English teacher, June 3rd, 1918 to February 18th, 2014. And yep, that's lies, not lays. No notes, as Elle said here. This one I called abstract. It says, the ham is melting, the turkey is suspended in midair, and the salami's hatching from its own egg. Why did we even come to the Salvador Deli? Need a rim shot for that one, too. I'm sure there's some weird melting clocks on the wall, too. And finally, we have this excellent mug that says, I before E, except when your foreign neighbor Keith receives 8 counterfeit beige sleighs from feisty caffeinated weightlifters. Weird. I think I want that mug. That's really good. All I could say was nay, nay, with an EI, of course. Have a great week, everybody. This is the video version of the newsletter. This week, I have a functional Java course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, and of course, that running uncensored and open source LLMs on your local machine, JetBrains LiveStream on Thursday. So hope you enjoyed that and enjoy the theme song, and I'll talk to you all next time. Take care.
Hey there, it's time to tune in to Tales from the Jar, so let's begin. Java, Kotlin, and Spring, oh my. Groovy Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the Jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech toast that never ends.